Welcome back, everybody. And you are at Mental Health Matters on KRUU FM 100.1, the most powerful radio station on the planet, everyone. Today we are doing part 2, getting out of traps in our own mind. The duality, the polarity, black and white thinking, however you want to describe it. And we got the whole round table with us today for an exciting show. Rob, take it away.
Well, good afternoon, and it's wonderful to be here and doing part 2. Also with me is Andrew.
Perry.
Oh, yeah. Well, just
Is
say
that what I
hello,
did?
Andrew.
All right. Hi.
And Sally Hare is also with us also. Sally, say hello.
Hello.
All right.
Good to be here.
Let's get started.
So, Sally, you had some great ideas in terms of thinking about this notion of rigid thinking, black and white thinking, however we're describing this, and you were thinking of it in terms of clutter.
Yeah, I recently came across some videos on YouTube about an ethnographic study which was done by anthropologists at the University of California, and they looked at American homes. They looked at 32 middle-class families, and they did a photographic essay where they took over 70,000 photographs of these families, of what they had in their homes, literally counted the objects in the rooms. And there are some really excellent videos. One was just on food. Another one, they talk about the number of toys found in American households.
That one was really great.
It was fascinating, and why people held on to toys, and being a mother with 2 kids and having moved through the toy situation, I totally identify and see that issue. And so I thought it was a really interesting study, and it kind of helped me in my own relationship to clutter, and a process I've been going through for a long time as a mother. Getting rid of kids' stuff is always going on. And just in thinking about my process of asking questions around, why am I holding on to something, and why do I need this? And, am I saving this book because my mother liked it? Or am I, why am I saving the book? And, it's led me to some interesting realizations that clutter and the need for holding on to things is obviously not what we need, not anything we need. There's definitely in the past rigid thinking around it, and I think there's a lot of questioning that needs to take place with regard to, my own life. But we were talking about this in terms of how we think, oh yes, I have to have this because of some past connection or some past relationship to it. But does that really serve me?
Well, I think that's really the question. I in black and white thinking, the problem for our own mental health is this notion of good or bad, right or wrong, that I'm good and my partner is bad. Well, if my partner is bad, then I'm a victim. And if my partner's good and I'm bad, then I'm a victimizer, or I am creating a problem. Or I have to be the rescuer of saving my partner, or they've got to save me. Either way, you're in a trap. And it's getting out of that and going, let's look at a much bigger picture here. And when we start thinking about our stuff, it really becomes... It's not just the physical stuff, it's the mental stuff, it's the belief systems that we also get so attached to in our worlds, that this is good or this is bad. Just like we do about religion or about any practice that we have. And so it's getting out of that to a much bigger frame of reference and really thinking about, well, what's really important? So when we look at our things, they're just things. We don't get to take them home. As they say, he with the most toys who dies still dies. You don't get to take it with you. The Egyptians were wrong.
Well, there's a woman in this town, Lenora Boyle, who teaches a process called option. And one of the things in option is you ask questions, and you get you basically get to a point where you get to a core belief, and then you ask yourself, well, do I really believe that? And a lot of times it's just something that you heard or you learned, some issue about money or some issue about abundance or some issue. You've learned this thing, and it's just an old saw in the, like a proverb that you think, and you don't actually believe it. And it's at the foundation of some belief or some behavior you've had that it doesn't even make any sense to you when you actually examine it.
Well, I think that's also, like Rob brought out a good point when we were talking earlier about the destruction of, for instance, media image, for example. And if, in this society, a woman is not attractive unless she looks like something from a media image. And the problem is that even those women don't look like that because they're airbrushed and it's not real. So what is it we're actually attracted to? What is it we actually want in our lives?
I think what I hear both of you saying, is that it's when we come to a realization of what makes sense in our own lives. What is essential to me? I happen to have written my thesis for my master's degree on what are basic needs and what are I can't remember the other word I used in the title, but what are the needs that are projected onto me that I feel are important but really aren't important? For instance, we talked earlier about I lived out in California, and you're judged by how well your lawn is mowed and and your plants grow and whether you water them at the right time and everything. And that's essential out there. I mean, for people that live there, that's essential in their lives as to how their lawn looks. And it's also internally, for us. Many people put on us what we're supposed to look like, what we're supposed to act like, what we're supposed to say, how we're supposed to deal with things. And earlier we were talking about, Scott, you were talking about how to move from this black and white thinking. And what keeps coming to mind is that it's very individualized. That there is no program out there that says this is what's right and this is what's wrong. I mean, there are natural laws and there are moral laws, and that you can put your life up against and evaluate yourself. But where do we find within ourselves the criteria that we really judge ourselves as to what is essential and what isn't essential?
But I think that's really the point, is that self-judgment. We judge others, it's like a projection out of our own self. And so when we start talking about mental health issues, for every one of us, you're absolutely right, Rob, it really is about an individual for you. And it's not just for you for your life. You're not who you were 10 years ago, or 10 years from now, or 2 months from now, or 2 days from now. We're constantly changing. It's like we're sharks, and if you don't keep swimming, you die. And when we start, it's the reference point can't be something outside of ourselves. I talk about in therapy about people becoming externally referenced, that the reference point of who they are is outside of them. And so then they're always trapped. They're always not good enough. If I have $1 million, congratulations, but now I need 2 million. Now I got 2 million, well, I need 10 million because it's still not good enough. When is it ever enough in this relative universe that we're okay with who we are? And the reference point is we could become self-referential of who we are and what we want to create.
I think we don't always recognize that some of the things that we identify as ourselves are really other people's statements on us.
Yeah.
And, in the Artist's Way book, they talk about, you actually do exercises where you identify who the critic is. And sometimes the critic is a parent or an art teacher who didn't think you were good enough, or, and we take those voices in and we start thinking that that's who we are. women take those voices in and go, oh, women are like this. Women are judgmental. Women are, and we've internalized the impression that we get from outside because we've been told all our lives what women are, quote, like.
Oh, right. And again, you don't measure up to the magazine. So
that's right. That's right.
You know, Rob, go ahead.
Sally, you mentioned this program called Options. And by the way, the option right now is that you are listening to Mental Health Matters on KRUU 100.1 FM radio in Fairfield, Iowa.
And with all these great comments we keep hearing from everyone, actually email us. Send us your comments. Send us show ideas. Come and be part of the radio. Go ahead, Rob. KRUUFM.com. Mental Health Matters at KRUUFM.com.
Sally, you mentioned this program, Options, and I think you said that it's a procedure that helps you kind of look at yourself and say, is this really what I believe? Is this true or not? Well, that's what, every program that I've encountered here in Fairfield since I've been here goes that way. Avatar, and what's the name of the person that's doing somebody's name?
Byron Katie?
Brian Katie. All of them saying, is this true? And that's really what, last week when we did this program, my point is that, it's the idea that we are connected with everyone. Everyone is connected, and we're inextricably connected. We cannot be taken apart. You get into the God particle or into the Hegg particle. Yeah, and everybody is connected. Therefore, it's like when I was climbing a mountain, I fell because my ankle got turned. And I got really mad at my ankle. I said, this is ridiculous, you ought to behave better than this. And it's like you're looking at other people and you're saying, you ought to behave better than this. And we are connected, and our behavior does affect everybody else. And I keep going back, and I don't know exactly how to say this, but I keep going back saying, it's in each of us. And I don't mean to say that each of us can have our own little world and have our own little decisions and have our own little criteria, because there are commonalities that make us able to work with each other and to relieve anxiety and to relieve isolation and to step back and to take a look at what are these traps that are in our minds that are bad things, and we need to, or not bad things, but they're things that we need to reassess.
Well, I think, again, get rid of that word bad. It's, again, bad or good. It's, again, because that's part of that same thinking. It's what works and what doesn't. But Andrew had some great points earlier.
I'm not sure what those points were, but
just in regards
to this last thing, I do have something I can share. Yeah, which is
anything you say is going to be great.
The shift from good and bad, maybe in terms of usefulness, is it's good and bad for what? What are you sorting for? What are you trying to accomplish? Good and bad only makes sense when it's in the context of some specific goal that you have. So I think that if that makes sense, that just saying good or bad implicitly, that it just these are the objective truth about this person or the situation or this behavior. You have to kind of invoke what philosophy or belief system or values that you have, what goals or objectives you have.
What's behind that?
What's behind that thing serves or doesn't serve?
Well, again, that's why I like working. Does this work for you? Does this not work for you? If it works for you, how can you make it work? If it doesn't work for you, how can you make it work for you? And if it's working for you, how can you make it so it works even better or continues working for you?
And works with other people. And with other people.
Absolutely, because it might work for you doesn't mean it works for...
That's exactly right.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and this returns... I wasn't so sure about this idea of clutter and the kind of... but now, when you were describing it, I was like, oh yeah, no, that is really close to the sensation that you get to, in the same way that when you pick up some object that has some dust on it in your house, you're like, do I really need this? And it is this conflicting kind of tension of just like, I don't, and you have all this, you do have some attachment, you have some identification into it. There's a whole history, it has all these associations, and but is it functional in your life? Is it bringing you happiness? Is it a waste of space? Would it be more useful to someone else? And it does kind of, that physical process invokes that same sensation as something that we probably don't do as often. And maybe we do, we just aren't aware of it because it doesn't have that physical aspect to it. But through our beliefs, the beliefs that we sort of take on, that's another theme that I've been hearing, is that we take on these ideas about our reality over the course of our lives. A lot of times it's the impressions that we form when we were in childhood. But yeah, sorting through that process and learning how do we let go of these things that aren't necessarily serving us anymore.
Well, I have a thing I ask myself, and that is, does it bring me joy? You know, and whether it's a thing or whether it's a belief, is this serving me? Does it bring me joy?
That's
and
beautiful. Yeah,
it's real. If it's clear that it doesn't, it's like, okay.
My sister sent me an article from this Japanese. She gets hired to help people like sort out their house, and that's the one. She's like, go through all your stuff and just, does it make you happy? And then, like, literally, is that the sensation that comes up when you look at it? And then even if you don't wear it, just like keep it.
Or does it still? Do you still need to then be attached to it? Do you still need this book that mom loved? And that picture might be making you happy, but do you need that physical picture? If you scanned it in and had it on your computer, would it? You know. But when we start talking about anxiety, which is, you know, and how that, and you know, Andrew, you were talking before about fear and scarcity and need, and, you know, anxiety is that same trap in the mind, that it's not good enough. I'm not good enough. That's self-judgment. I don't have enough. I'm too stressed at work. I'm trapped by this motor that's driving me, and I don't know where to go and what to do with it. You could have that same energy, and if you got purpose with it, you're not anxious. You're in motion. You're in flow. But when you don't know what to do with that purpose, you know, with that energy, and it's like, oh my God, I'm trapped. I don't know where to take it. Now it's anxious.
Yeah, I think that there's like kind of like a bright side of black and white or good and bad thinking, which is you can sort through stuff and you're like, this serves me, this doesn't serve me. And even the process of doing that, we're just talking about maybe even a frequency to do it more often. But then there's also this dark side of kind of good and bad thinking, which is all those things that you mentioned in terms of the anxiety that can come with is like comparing yourself against some set of ideals or standards, which are good, and then thus the things that aren't that are bad, and you don't want to be bad. And even earlier in your master's thesis, you're talking about, I'm not sure if they're like cultural like needs or social needs or whatever.
Right.
But they're appealing to a deeper human need. There is a fundamental need of acceptance too. And so it's like, yeah, I want to do these things, so I'll get accepted, you know, or go to heaven or whatever this deeper thing is, but to have peace, to have meaning, to have purpose, to have place. I think these are the deeper kind of fundamental human needs in which we figure out these different strategies over the course of our lives to try to fulfill those.
It's interesting when I think of this. I mean, that's a great thinking in terms of binary thinking, that it actually did serve us in some ways at some point. It's like any maladaptive coping mechanism, that it just run amok. So we come up with these mechanisms when we're a child, something bad's happening, and we come up with for women sometimes, you know, men are giving me too much attention and I don't like the attention I'm getting, so I'm going to gain weight or I'm going to not take care of myself in a certain way. And maybe it did the thing of pushing away that attention, but what it did, it started to become self-destructive.
Or another example is like if anger was punished in the household where you were sent to your room, you had to be by yourself.
Then
you're like, oh, I'll never be angry. I'll just suppress that aspect of myself. And then later on in your adult life, you don't necessarily have access to that energy. And so in situations where standing up for yourself or something you believe in or someone else, that's not there.
And so it's, again, getting out of that notion of judgment. You made a great comment before about, you know, I'm intolerant of people
who are intolerant.
Yes.
Yeah.
And right. And so I've become intolerant because I'm intolerant of intolerant people.
Right.
And, you know, it's like, and so it's really about when it becomes maladaptive. It's not that it's not useful, and at times to sort things out, to go, yes, no, I like this, I don't like this. You know, this works, this doesn't. Sometimes you need that binary thinking, but...
Well, I think this points to a really fundamental principle around this whole topic, which you kind of mentioned earlier, is just that it's so individualized, that really it's the individual who needs to identify what in their life, what pattern is currently being disruptive, isn't bringing happiness or joy or fulfillment, because this is the indicator that something is askew and needs some adjustment.
I agree with that, but I think also for me, I have to push it a little further and say, just because I agree and it makes me feel good, I have to put that into the bigger perspective of how does it impact other people, because we are all connected, and
but that's still you.
Yeah, right.
It's you being an empathetic, sensitive person that if you see that your actions cause harm, that is disturbing to you.
Yeah, I have a moment to announce that we are KRUU Radio 100.1 FM in Fairfield, Iowa, broadcasting
6:30 on Tuesdays and 12:30 rebroadcast on Thursdays, and we're going to be archived everything. So check us out. Email us mentalhealthmatters@KRUU.FM.
Okay, and again, I go back to the individual thing that you were talking about, but if we are, I was going to say that I have a very close friend who is a very left-wing thinking person, and he cannot understand and doesn't think that the world ought to provide space for teabaggers or Tea Party people. I mean that's his thinking is that if you don't think like him, then you're wrong. I mean it's definitely black and white. He said, "What? Go ahead."
Oh, well, I was just to kind of propound a little bit more on the individualized, is that in this principle, if it's acting with your conversation with your friend, you have to wait until that moment, until there's a recognition within him that style of thinking, that belief or way of functioning isn't serving him.
So it doesn't matter if it's left or right. If I'm a right, if I'm right wing, and all Democrats should be shoved into the sea. It's like all Palestinians are bad. No, all Jews are bad. It's like no, it doesn't work.
Exactly.
Like that.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, I was also saying that the shift away from rigid thinking, it happens on this little moment in which there's a recognition by the individual that has that rigid thinking, that way of functioning is no longer sufficient to meet the needs of that person. Yeah, and it's only then when there's the receptivity for change and the interest in change.
And I agree with you. It's just unfortunately, in the 4 years I've known him, he hasn't reached that point yet. But anyway.
Yeah, and it may be his whole life. And it's causing maybe challenges to people around him, and thus that is the role of community.
It definitely is.
In terms of us providing constructive feedback loops to people around us, to just point out, blind spots or experiences that are outside of that person's experience or reality.
But if you're doing that externally like that with whatever your philosophy is, you're also doing that in your relationships. I always see this cropping up over and over and over again. And it doesn't matter right, left, center, when I start becoming too binary in my thinking, too black and white, then I start spelling that out in, for instance, all my relationships. And it could be my intimate relationships or just a friend. They're either for me or they're against me. Mm-hmm. They're on my side or they're not on my side. It's us against the world. And that's actually a cult mindset, by the way. Yeah. It's one of the indicators of cult mindset is that you're for us or you're against us. You're part of us or you're not part of us. And if you're not part of us, you're kicked out of us. And there's no tolerance of ambiguity.
I think that is such an easy trap to fall into. And in my own experience, it's one of just being defensive. Anything who says anything critical towards me, I'm defensive towards.
Yes.
So I fall into that trap of they're against me. And I think it's super easy to fall into that. I had a conversation with an aunt of mine who's my cousin passed away yesterday, and she was a super Orthodox Jew, super Orthodox Jew, and her mother wasn't. Her mother wasn't Jewish. And she's like, I don't even know if I'm allowed to go to the memorial. I said, you're her mother. You're her mother. You can go to the memorial. And she said, but I'm not allowed because, I don't follow the rules of the Orthodoxy. She's not a Jew.
Yeah.
And, she's very, I can feel how easy it is to get into this mode of just being, meeting something with a wall of being defensive.
Yeah.
It's so easy to go there because you feel attacked, because you feel, well, they can't possibly be for me. They can't possibly understand where I'm coming from. They can't possibly, and they have no empathy for me. And that may not even be true, but in being criticized or attacked or called on something, we even do this with our closest friends, with our relationships, with our kids. We do it all the time. It's really easy to get in defense mode. So the trick is not to be so defensive, and that's a big trick. And maybe you can help enlighten us on how we not do that. But being aware of it, of course, is the main thing.
Absolutely, it's an awareness, but it's acting on that awareness. I think too often in therapy, it's always about pointing a finger to the past. And as everybody knows, I'm a future-focused therapist, and I look at what we're creating from what's happened in the future. Trauma, as I've said a billion times, isn't what happened, it's what we did and we're doing with what happened. What we're creating from it. Trauma to you isn't trauma to me. What we're doing with what happened. And so it's always coming back to this notion, like you said, for instance, even with our kids, that it becomes too easy and too tiresome to not just say, just do this. Just do what I tell you to do. Because you get worn down and they ask you over and over again, come on. And it's like, and then it's like you stop those critical thinking skills because it's all about you. Now you're the bad guy. In a relationship, you react and you become reactive to somebody being angry or stressed or whatever, and you become reactive, then it becomes all about you and not what the person was doing. As soon as you become reactive, you're both trapped and you have two sinking people.
And you become reactive, you get distracted by how you feel rather than actually listening to what they're requesting or what they're asking.
Oh, absolutely.
And so there's no real meeting. You just get to this point where you're just reacting in defense mode, and it's not communicating.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Right. And so to have true communication with a friend, with a family member, with a lover, it's really about that sense of a greater sense of, like I said, there's two things in a relationship. There's coordination and there's connection. We all think of relationships as just being connection, passion, feeling, some point of really connecting with another person. But it's also really about coordinating our lives, not just getting up and going to sleep at the same time, but having a similar vision, having a way to disagree. And your job is not about agreeing. Couples are not here to agree. They're here to agree to communicate fully and completely and to really connect in that agreement, in that communication. And so it's the same with our children. It's the same with our friends.
It's also just about time for us to end this. So why don't we just...
that was way too much fun.
I know. What can we have any kind of a summary of what we've talked about here? I mean, I have a lot more questions than I have answers.
But that's part of this. So part of what we're doing here on this radio is really we're opening up the door. What we're not here just to finish these conversations. We're here to start you going so you can bring it back to yourself and have that conversation, and to bring it up with your friends and your family and your loved people in your life, and to go, yes, maybe I'm been limiting my thinking, and maybe I need to open up a little bit more. Maybe I need to consider new possibilities. Maybe this thought even about my depression isn't that I'm as trapped in my mind with that depression or that anxiety or that whatever that is, and maybe that even has some opening. But we got to close out. So, Andrew, what do you have to say?
Something that struck me just listening to everyone talk is just how to identify when I'm being rigid is just themes. The words I've become suspicious of, and then maybe extreme statements or black and white fear. Anytime I'm afraid of something, attachment, I start to inquire different. These are signals for me to dig deeper.
Yeah,
great.
I'm done.
Sally, last word. Say goodbye.
Say goodbye.
All right.
That's great.
Thank you, everyone. What a great show, and we'll bring the round table back again soon. KRUU FM. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.